Welcome to the show. I'm Chris Graham. This is the Ratcliffe show, and it's Friday. We delayed a day to try to get some news in about the baseball team. We'll talk baseball a little later in the show, but Jerry, we'll start with your update earlier this week on Jarin Stevenson, the five-star recruit that Virginia's been working on, among other schools who've been working on this young man. What's the latest on Jarin Stevenson and whether or not he'll reclassify, what his plans might be for next fall?
Well, Chris, I think a lot of it's still up in the air. Stevenson, the 6'10" power forward, number one power forward in America in his class of 2024, although he's strongly considering reclassifying to this class. And he doesn't have much time to make that decision. So he apparently played in a EBYL tournament not this past weekend, but the one before. As far as I can gather, he visited North Carolina over the weekend, which would be his last official visit. A lot of people believe it's going to come down to Carolina and Virginia. And some people think that he may be leaning toward Carolina. So he was asked about all that after the tournament that he participated in, and he said that he hopes to make his decision on whether to reclassify by the end of his school year, which is June the 9th, coming up quickly. And if he does decide to classify, which he flat out said that he was very interested in doing because he's ready to make a step up in competition. If he makes that decision on June 9th, I don't know when Carolina starts their summer program academically, but Virginia starts its, I believe, on June the 16th. So what a quick turnaround that would be should he choose UVA, and I assume Carolina is probably has something similar to that. So it's going to come fast and furious for the young man and his family. And he's also considering Alabama, Missouri, and Georgetown, all three of which he visited earlier. But it sounds like he really wants to play college ball this coming fall. And again, to me, it just everything I've read and seen and talked to his father, it seems like it's Virginia or Carolina. His dad raved about Virginia. The couple of things that he said that stuck out to me was that one, he wanted to send his son somewhere where he could develop into an NBA player, and certainly that's Virginia's MO. They've developed a lot of NBA guys in the past 10 years. The other thing is that he wanted his son to go somewhere that not only could he develop, but he would be given the freedom to show his all-around talent. That makes you wonder a little bit if that is against Virginia, because obviously their guys don't get as much freedom as some other programs. I don't believe. It's more of a structured offense, and as opposed to somewhere like Carolina. But so I think it's all kind of 50-50 right now, in what direction this kid may go.
Yeah, what I'd throw out is if I'm recruiting against Virginia in this one, I'd say, the bigs there set screens and rebound and play defense a lot, and maybe don't have the freedom to play offense. If I was recruiting against North Carolina, I'd say their bigs do well in college and don't translate the game to the NBA. A lot of them don't even get a chance in the NBA because of that. So, yeah, it's I guess I sound like I'm recruiting against both of them. In that sense.
Maybe you're in Alabama.
Maybe I'm Alabama.
You can come here and you can do it all.
Well, if I'm recruiting against Alabama, I advise your son to bring a gun with him to come to school. If I'm recruiting against Georgetown, I say they haven't won double-digit games in years. And if I'm recruiting against Missouri, I'm saying, does Missouri still play college basketball at the Power 5 level? So yeah, I think they can all cancel out each other. But yeah, you're right. The timeline is coming up. I know the second session, like you said, for Virginia Summer School is June 16th. But you got to say this: if a young man has enough high school credits to graduate, what good does it do him to stay another year in high school? It's time to move on.
Yeah,
I think that decision is probably already made. It's more just a matter of where he's going to go as opposed to what he's going to do. It just from a academic standpoint and from an athletics development standpoint, it doesn't do you any good to play another year of college, high school basketball. Go ahead and go to college.
I think you're right. And I think he probably has made that decision. Every quote I've seen from him and his father sounds like they're ready to make the jump in competition. Even his dad said he's the best player by far on the high school basketball team that his father happens to coach. So I don't know that he would get much out of another year of high school ball. So I expect him to make a decision sometime, maybe before June 9th on what he's going to do. And he may already have his mind made up as to where he's going to go. We don't know that, but you wonder if Virginia might have heard something, because I've seen where Virginia has reached out to another kid who entered the transfer portal on May 11th. But I think he is also in the NBA draft, and that's Julian Phillips, a rising sophomore power forward, 6'8", 200 pounds, from Tennessee. And he has 3 years of eligibility left, and there was about 25 or 30 schools that hopped on him immediately, including Virginia, and Kentucky just jumped in, who was the kid's favorite team growing up in high school. But if Virginia's reaching out to this kid, that makes you wonder if they feel like they're going to get Stevenson. And it makes you also wonder if Reese Beekman is going to be coming back. Not that Reese plays the same position, but it just sounds like that they're still out there hunting for a potential player who can help them next year. And certainly Julian Phillips would be. He's I think he was on the SEC all freshman team. I'm not sure. I think I read that somewhere, but lots to be decided in basketball still over the next week or two, and including whether Beekman's going to stay in the NBA draft or not. So still a little intrigue in hoops, Chris, and which never seems to stop.
Yeah, Reese has until May 31st, next Wednesday, to make his final call, to stay in the draft, come back to Virginia. One thing you said there, Jerry, made me think about in past years, Coach Bennett, when he would have an extra scholarship or even two, but if he felt like, well, my rotation is probably pretty good now, I'll just save those scholarships and use them in future years. I don't know that makes any sense now. That's probably why you're seeing a coach like Tony Bennett go out there, even with whether he has one or two scholarships, depending on when Reese Beekman what he decides. If Reese comes back, there's still one extra scholarship, and if Reese doesn't come back, there's two. But in this day and age, when the transfer portal is basically free agency year to year, it doesn't do you any good to stockpile scholarships for future years, because the guys you got on your roster now might decide to leave. So if you're gonna have them, you might as well use them, even if it's just for a year or two.
Yeah, I would agree. And perhaps if they had used Isaac Trout this past season, instead of saving him as a redshirt, maybe he would still be here. I don't know that, but something to consider. But Yeah, I agree with you. With the turmoil in college athletics the way it is, I don't think it does any good to save anything now. You got to play for the moment, and because you don't know what's going to happen with even what you think might be the most secure member of your team um, from one season to the next. So there's no reason to hold back.
Trout told The Athletic for a story this week where the athletics reporters got access to Tony Bennett that we don't get. But Trout said that even if he'd played 30 minutes a game this year, he was probably looking to transfer. He was homesick. I mean, we've heard that a lot, but he confirmed, once again, homesick. And, Jerry, one thing I've heard, one former ACC assistant coach was talking about this. I won't name him. Recently, that his school was also in on Trout, and when they went to visit Trout to talk with him about the recruiting process, that his girlfriend that he was homesick over was there with him in the living room when the coaching staff met with Trout in Nebraska as he was being recruited. And so if he was a homebody, and he had lots of great offers. He was offered Virginia, Carolina, Gonzaga, Kansas, among others. Lots of great offers from Trout. And also what's interesting is he said in the Athletic article that he sees himself as much more of an offensive player, and the Virginia system is so defensive oriented that he's excited about going to Creighton because their focus is on the offensive end. That seems like sort of a double miss, both by Virginia, not sort of maybe, checking out all the boxes you need to check on Trout and his interest, both, being homesick from halfway across the country and also being more focused on the offensive end than wanting to learn the pack line and play defense, but also on Trout's part. I mean, he didn't lose anything in this. He got a year of college. He gets his 4 years of eligibility with the red shirt. But, the fact he ventured halfway across the country to a place that probably wasn't a fit, both in terms of his preferred style of play and then the fact that it's halfway across the country. I don't know. It feels like both sides missed on that one.
Yeah, it really does. I didn't get a chance to read the Athletic story. I don't subscribe to that, but yeah, you're right. I mean, sounds like he wasn't totally vetted to where they couldn't see something like this as a possible roadblock or obstacle down the road. You would think they would have checked that out a little more thoroughly, just to see if that might be a problem that would crop up in the future and how to deal with it if it did. But obviously that didn't happen.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Isaac Trout and Leon Bond might be the last guys to redshirt. Tony's used the red shirt a lot in past years, including with DeAndre Hunter, who ended up being the number 4 pick in the draft in 2019. But at this stage, if you're going to put a scholarship on a kid, you're going to, the school's going to commit, the athletics program is going to commit some money to putting that kid through a year of school. You might want to get something out of them, given the way things are going.
Yeah, no question about it. No question.
So that's basketball, and again, we're waiting on the Reese Beekman news. We'll be waiting on the Jarin Stevenson news. We could have some. Well, we'll have to have Beekman news one way or the other between now and next Wednesday. We could get some news soon as well on Jarin Stevenson. So we'll be keeping up with all that. Jerry, no news on the football front this week. We'll talk about the. This weekend, the men's lacrosse team is in championship weekend, what you could call the Final Four. 3 ACC teams among the Final Four teams in the NCAA men's lacrosse tournament. Duke, the number 1 seed, Virginia, the number 2 seed, Notre Dame, the number 3 seed. We know there will be at least one ACC team in the final on Monday. And Virginia would love to be matched up with Duke, I think, just from the standpoint of the fact that Duke has owned Virginia in lacrosse for the last several years. So, don't want to look too far ahead, but big weekend coming up for men's lacrosse.
Yeah, first they got to get by the Irish, which they have beaten twice already this year when Notre Dame was ranked number one in the country both
Yeah.
times. So they're going to be coming with fire in their eyes, trying to avenge those two losses and get into the finals themselves under Coach Corrigan up there. But that should be a heck of a battle come Saturday. And should Virginia be able to survive that, and I would expect that Duke will win that other matchup. And we all know the history, as you mentioned, between Virginia and Duke, and it's obviously lopsided in favor of the Blue Devils. They just seem to have had Virginia's number for a decade or more, and so that has to end at some point, right? If you're
Yeah,
large,
because they're both such good programs. It's not like Virginia's had, Virginia won back-to-back championships, 2019, 2021. We still beat Duke.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm interested to watch Connor Schellenberger, a local kid, went to St. Anne's Belfield and has earned the nickname of Mr. May for his incredible postseason numbers that he's put up the last couple of years, ever since his freshman year. And if he can continue on the tear that he's on, certainly that weighs in Virginia's favor. He's a fun kid to watch. I actually know the family a little bit. His dad was one of the best amateur golfers around Charlottesville during his heyday. I wrote much about him. In fact, he won our Battle Trophy award one year for the best local amateur golfer, and great guy who I think he was on the pro mini tour for a little while, and I think he might have even played some baseball at William and Mary, if my mind can go back 20 years. I think that's what he told me. But so he comes from an athletic family. I'm not sure about his mom. I know she's a strong supporter. I don't know what kind of athletic background she might have, but fun for all the local people, even those who are not followers of UVA, but of just local kids in St. Anne's Belfield, for Connor to be having such an incredible career. And he's one of the Tewerton finalists, for which is essentially the lacrosse version of the Heisman Trophy. Wouldn't it be cool to see a local kid win that?
Yeah, a purely local kid who talked about the fact that he grew up in the Charlottesville area is a big reason why he was inspired to want to play lacrosse in the first place. Yeah, it'd be a neat story. The games are this weekend is at Linco Field, the home of the Philadelphia Eagles up in Philadelphia. Tomorrow's games, and then the championship on Monday. This is a time of year UVA lacrosse is used to being involved in championship weekends. There's a lot of Monday Memorial Day games in the recent past for Virginia lacrosse. So we'll be keeping our eyes on that, keeping our tabs on that. Not playing this weekend, but looking forward to Monday in a different capacity will be the Virginia baseball team. The Hoos were eliminated from the ACC baseball championship yesterday by North Carolina after a 1-1 run through that field. 45-12 record overall. The Hoos are look likely. I mean, it's about as certain as you can be that they'll be hosting first weekend, which will be next weekend of the NCAA tournament. The only question is as we look forward to Monday when the seeds are announced is whether Virginia will get a top 8 seed, which is a distinct possibility that would give the baseball program a chance, if they were to win next weekend, to then also host the super regional weekend. Another thing it was a rite of passage there for a while, Jerry. There were a lot of super regional weekends, and back in the 2009 to about 2015 or so era. It's been a little while since we've had one here in Charlottesville, but it feels familiar this time of year with Virginia baseball being in this conversation.
Yeah, I can remember all the fun we had covering those regionals and super regionals with teams like Oklahoma coming in here, some of their better teams in their history. I think Oregon State. I know Oregon State
Yeah.
came in here. Just really a lot of good teams over that span of time, and who will ever forget that dramatic bottom of the ninth?
Yeah,
Cal
Irvine had 2 outs and 2 strikes with nobody on base, and Virginia came back and won.
I think Chris Taylor
Yeah,
I think he's the one that got the hit that
he is.
run. Yeah. One of the golden moments in Virginia baseball history, or sports history for that matter.
Yeah.
So many great moments that the baseball team has provided, thrills for the a really hungry Virginia baseball fandom, so to speak. I know the fans are ready to have another regional back here and have something to get excited about. I imagine Disharoon Park will probably set some new attendance records perhaps next weekend, depending on the field and everything. So we could be in store for a pretty neat weekend.
The loss yesterday was the first in a while. Virginia had won 10 straight. There had been, last year, Jerry, remember the Hoos were 26-3 midway through the season, and then kind of struggled on the stretch. Actually finished 13-16 in their last 29 games, and fizzled out in the first round of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. This year's team had a 5-7 stretch, and then went ahead and won 10 straight, including 7 straight in ACC play. So it's a solid lineup. You got the ACC Player of the Year and Kyle Teal, who's a guy that's looked at as a first-round pick in this summer's MLB draft. Jake Geloff is also another guy that could be a first-round pick, maybe an early second-round pick, maybe compensation first-round pick too. So somewhere in that range, late first round all the way to first couple picks of the second round. You've got Griff O'Farrell at shortstop hitting over 400 in the leadoff spot. Ethan O'Donnell coming in and putting some big power numbers up to transfer. It's a solid lineup. They've got some pretty good pitching, and Coach O'Connor has got the team back on track after that midseason lull.
Yeah, absolutely. They I thought it was interesting. He talked about how well, I asked him in a sort of a mini press conference on the field last Monday morning if he had a message for his team going into postseason play, and he said no. He said we really don't this year, because we kind of changed that message, we advanced that messaging to a couple of weeks ago when the team decided that they wanted to start playing playoff baseball then, instead of waiting until the actual playoffs, and treat every game as if it were a life or death matter, and pour everything they had into every game, no matter what inning, what circumstance. Everybody was available. All the pitchers were available, whatever it took to win each individual game. And wow, that worked really well for them. Like you said, rattling off 10 straight wins until they ran into a pretty hot Carolina team yesterday. So I imagine that they'll just pick up where they left off, and they're used to playing in that mode, so it won't be anything foreign to them when they host their first game next weekend. So I expect we'll see some pretty intense baseball coming from the Cavaliers when the tournament returns to Charlottesville at the Disharoon Park.
That's right. That'll be next Friday. So a week from today, we'll find out who the opponents will be on Monday as the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee reveals the field, and the 4-team double elimination tournament group there that will be in Disharoon Park beginning on Friday. And then also the big question as to whether Virginia gets a top 8 national seed that would give them a chance to play all the way to host all the way through the College World Series. Jerry, one last thing to talk about, an article you picked up going into the ins and outs, the legal ins and outs of the grant of media rights that has been so much at discussion as the ACC has been once again the last couple of weeks. A lot of discussion about whether or not the ACC will continue to be in some capacities. A lot of schools, including Virginia, have apparently been looking at that grant of media rights to see if there are any loopholes. So what's the sense, just based on the tell us about the article you read that gave you some insight into that?
Yeah, Dennis Dodd, who is a terrific college sports writer for CBS, been a national writer for a long time, had a very interesting article where he discovered that the ACC got their grant of rights idea from the Big 12, and their former commissioner, Bob Bowlesby, who wanted to try to keep the Big 12 together as long as he could, and he did until their grant of rights contract expired, and that's when Texas and Oklahoma decided to jump. And I don't know how he came up with this. I don't know if it was his attorneys or who, but they went back to a I think it still cost Texas and Oklahoma combined $100 million, in order to leave, but maybe a year early. But I was just thumbing through some of this article trying to figure out. Apparently, this contract goes back to it's a federal copyright law that was explained in the Big 12's contract, and it allows the thing that was important about that was that any disputes would be heard in federal court in Delaware and not in a state court. So if Florida wanted to get out of the challenge the grant of rights package, they couldn't do it in the state of Florida where it would give them home court advantage. They would have to go to Delaware and fight it in court there, where they would have no advantage over the conference. So that's why Texas didn't fight it, and that's why Florida State is not fighting it either. The Big 12 legal team had the answer when the 2012 TV deal was finalized. They needed a strategy that found a jet sweep around the 11th Amendment, which includes the concept of state sovereign immunity. It's get this, it's a 115-year-old landmark Supreme Court case, Ex parte Young, which circumvents states' sovereign immunity to allow lawsuits in federal courts for injunctions against state officials if they act against federal law or the U.S. Constitution. So that sounds about as ironclad as you can get. Gosh, I lost my place here. There's something else I thought was pretty funny or pretty entertaining, informative, is that where is it? I'll find it here. Okay, here we go. The Stanford Law Review called the decision the cornerstone of modern constitutional litigation, and an attorney who has viewed the Big 12's grant of rights said every state has different sovereign immunity laws, especially in Texas. It's very hard to sue a state institution like a state university. Ex parte Young is a way to try to get around those issues. It would allow you to sue the president of a university if he tried to take Team X to another conference, violating the grant of rights. Challenge in a contracting court would expose a school to unknown and uncertain liabilities, both legal and financial. It would not know how much it would have to pay to get out, whereas exit fees are largely negotiable. Let's see. That's why Texas and Oklahoma just tried to wait out the end of the contract. Bowlesby hired a New York litigation firm to go through their grant of rights contract, which the ACC essentially copied. I asked them to tear it apart, Bowlesby said. They came back and said, this is ironclad. You can take it to any federal court in the country and win. So I think as long as that is in existence, Chris, I don't think anything's going to happen unless the ACC would expand or something to allow. That's the only way apparently that you can challenge anything, and is to have a new TV contract with ESPN. And this thing sounds like that it's, if anything is ironclad, this really is. So
I wonder though, Jerry, I'm just going to throw it out there.
Yeah.
I'm tapping back into my limited expertise. I have my undergraduate degree is supposedly in constitutional law, and that was 25. Oh gosh, it was not 25 years. It was 29 years ago. Oh my God, I'm getting old. But if the league were somehow, if members of the league were to vote to dissolve the league, and I know that this is not a guarantee. And right now we've talked about 7 that look like they're interested in leaving. We've heard of the Magnificent 7. If there would be an 8th, that would be a majority of the 15 members, or 14, if depending on how you'd have to count that out, because Notre Dame's not a football member. If the league were to cease to be, so like you mentioned, if the ACC were to expand, add another member or 2, or how many ever there might add, that would change the nature of the ACC and would change the nature of the TV contract, and that would open things up. The conference could expand, but also could lose members if that was the case. And maybe that's one reason we haven't seen a push to expand the ACC, because of fear of what could happen if that were to be the case. But what if the 8 members were to vote? If 8 members were to vote to dissolve the league, I think the grant of media rights for individual members, yes, it's ironclad, unless you want to pay the amount of money you'd have to pay to get out. And that seems, yes, it's prohibitive for a reason. The exit fee of 3 times your annual TV revenues, roughly $120 million, plus you lose the right to your TV revenues until the end of the grant of media rights. Right now, it's roughly $37 million a year times 13 years. You're talking that's another at least $400 million. So you're at this stage, if you're trying to leave this year, you'd pay $500 million to get out. If an individual school wants to get out, that's what it costs. If Clemson and Florida State want to get out $500 million a year, then great, they're getting out. But how much can they make back from a contract with the SEC to make that worthwhile? But if the ACC were to cease to exist, that's a different issue. And I don't know that anybody's even, if they're actually anywhere close to that being a case. But it would surprise me if that wasn't a cudgel that the Magnificent 7 could use. If they could break one more off, that could be a power leverage kind of thing. It's speculation, but I can see the point about if one school wants to leave, $500 million, go for it.
Yeah.
But there could be other ways. I just don't know if those other ways are realistic.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And most athletic departments that I know of are struggling to make a real profit after they pay all their bills. So they don't have a lot of extra money to throw around.
Not 500 million, certainly.
And it sounds like that, at least for the meantime, that some of the schools like Florida State and Clemson, Miami might be pacified, for lack of a better word, with the new revenue sharing plan, which was announced and approved by the school presidents in the league earlier this week, to where they'll get a bigger share of the pie should they make postseason play in football and basketball. I guess those are the only two sports that really bring any money into the conference. So, of those Magnificent Seven, some of those schools haven't done a whole lot to earn extra money in recent years. So, I mean, Virginia's been in the NCAA tournament a couple of times, but hasn't really advanced. And some of the others haven't even made the NCAA tournament, let alone do anything once they got to it. And obviously, the only school the conference has had that's participated in the playoffs is Clemson. And, Florida State has been in a couple of decent sized bowl games. But some of these teams really haven't been in bowl games that produce much money. So I don't know. There's they got what they asked for, and that they're going to get more revenue sharing for them, less for the others. But you're on your own in terms of making it in the postseason. Miami has probably made as much money in basketball as anybody the past couple of years. Nothing in football.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that some of these schools that have been wanting a bigger share of the pie really haven't done much to earn a bigger share of the pie.
I've seen the number associated with it. It may have gone up a little bit since it was maybe last summer. There's a your conference gets about $2 million for every round of the NCAA tournament that you appear in. So if you have 8, this year, I guess Virginia, ACC had 5 teams. If everybody lost in the first round, the ACC would still get $10 million. Of course, Miami made the Final Four. We had a couple other teams advance a little bit in the tournament. And that money is actually, I think, paid out over a 4-year period. So, if you count Miami getting 10, they played 5 games, that's $10 million. Virginia played 1 game, that would be $2 million, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, the way the ACC does that is, let's say that total was $20 million. They split that up among all 15 schools. And so you're getting 1.3 or $1.4 million per school for that. And then, you get accumulated money from past years and then going forward, but still you're probably getting, maybe a total of $2 or $2.5, $3 million for your NCAA tournament. If you're Miami and you got to the Final Four and you're getting to take a share of your $10 million, you're pretty happy with that. A bigger share of that. I don't know if they get all of, if this new revenue sharing agreement, you get all of that, but if you get a bigger share than just splitting it with everybody, yeah, you're happy with that. That incentivizes doing well in basketball, which has not been incentivized as much, certainly in the ACC, with this total revenue sharing. And honestly, it's the same thing for the college football playoff, as you mentioned. I mean, Florida State played in a couple, but it's been a while. Clemson's been the most recent, and we haven't had anybody for the last 2 years. As we expand the playoff to 12 teams starting in 2024, the goal of the ACC as a conference is going to be, let's get at least 2 in there, not just 1, but 2 in there. And so, that's part of the motivation for both let's go to a 14-team conference instead of 2 7-team division model, and also the championship game being the top 2 teams instead of 2 division champs. So you give yourself a chance to maybe, have 2 teams make that playoff. That gives you the ability to bring some more money in. And certainly if, I would think the top contenders for that, I don't know if Carolina is going to be good enough by 2024. I think Drake May's probably only going to be 1 more year in college. The Carolina quarterback. Clemson's got to be getting their way back up that in that direction. We assume that might be the case. Florida State had a 10-win season last year. We'll see if Mike Norvell can continue to build on that. But yeah, that's incentivizing, but it's still incentivizing within a smaller pot than what the Big Ten and SEC. Right now, the discrepancy is around $20 million a year just from the TV money to schools. The ACC schools are getting paid out around $37 million a year. The Big Ten and SEC are closer to $55 to $60 million per year. And by the end of the decade, that discrepancy is supposed to be more in the $50 million per year range. So So the work's got to be there's more work to be done there. And it's not like ESPN is just going to magically say, here's some more money. We feel sorry for you, ACC. We're going to give you more money in your TV deal. So there's going to have to be some creative work there on the part of Jim Phillips and the crew. So I see this move this week solidifying what was talked about last week is just a step in the direction. There's a lot more steps need to be made.
Yeah, I would agree. And some of the Magnificent Seven haven't been that magnificent in terms of postseason play. If you go back and look at NC State, Virginia Tech, and Virginia, I mean, not a lot there to garner in terms of being able to earn a lot of extra money. So some of the Magnificent Seven just haven't gotten the job done. So, and none of those three football programs are forecast to have great seasons this year either. So,
if Carla Williams could have had some bank out of 2019, though, I mean, Orange Bowl,
yeah,
national championship. If you get 6 games in a national in the NCAA tournament, that'd be $12 million. Whatever the Orange Bowl pays out, that would have been a good year for Virginia.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That was one of the banner years in Virginia athletics for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I would think with a 12-team playoff format, I think probably be at least 2 ACC teams involved. I would think, because I know some of the schools are putting a lot, investing a lot into football again, not just in terms of money, but in other resources, facilities, and coaching staffs, and that sort of thing, trying to stay abreast with the SEC if that's possible. And then, but this is going to place a true hardship, I think, on some of the bottom teams in the league. I mean, you look at Boston College, Georgia Tech, perhaps Wake Forest, Duke. I know they've been good in basketball, but their football program hasn't. Well, they had a good season last year, but it didn't really. It wouldn't have put them in the playoffs by any stretch, even if it was a 12-team playoff. But some of these schools who are probably on a fairly tight budget to begin with, this is going to certainly have an effect on them. And I know, just hearing scuttlebutt way back in the fall, that some of the thing to watch out for was that some of the schools wanted to get rid of some of the bottom feeders from the conference, and that this was a way to do it by essentially strangling their finances. I don't know if that would cause some of these teams to want to leave the ACC. I don't know where they would go. They would have to go to a smaller, or a less than Power 5 conference, I guess. But makes you wonder about the future in that respect as well.
It does. The logicals would be perhaps Boston College. You mentioned Syracuse, 2 schools that aren't geographic fits and really haven't paid off in terms of giving us access to media markets like we hoped. Pittsburgh's been successful in football, but I think logically they could make a move as well. I mean, I could see the Big 12 saying to Pitt, come and join us, and you can play West Virginia every year. And that, then it gives West Virginia a travel partner.
Yeah, Louisville too.
And Louisville, yeah, perhaps Louisville too, yeah, which is not a fit in a lot of ways with the ACC, and hasn't been since the beginning. Yeah, it's seeing where things are going to be heading in the next little bit. I mean, it could the outside shot of the ACC perhaps imploding on itself doesn't seem as likely, but it could be a remote possibility. Getting smaller certainly is a possibility. I don't know that ESPN would have a problem with that. But the money is an issue, and no matter who you are in the ACC, everybody aspires to be. I shouldn't say everybody. Everybody in that Magnificent Seven aspires to be more than what they are in football. And that's been a John Swafford had the vision to make the ACC a more of a player in football, and it's not his fault that it didn't work out. The move to bring Miami in the league. Miami's only been in the ACC championship game once since it joined the league in 2004. Virginia Tech was a big player early in their tenure in the ACC, but since the decline in Frank Beamer's last few years, it's been about a decade of Virginia Tech not being a player on the national stage. Florida State suffered after Bobby Bowden. I mean, there were a couple of good years with Jimbo Fisher, but his tenure petered out when he left the cupboard bare, and they've been trying to figure things out ever since. You sort of go down a list. Even Clemson has been struggling lately. The last 2 years not being in the playoff. The idea to make the ACC a football conference largely hasn't played out the way Swofford intended, and that's not his fault. And now it's left to Jim Phillips to have to pick up the pieces. Football does drive the economy in college sports, and the only way you can fix that is to just hope somebody gets better and can raise the fortunes of the whole league.
Yeah, and Gene Corrigan recognized that back when he took over the reins as commissioner back in, I guess it was the early 90s. I remember some people who were at that first meeting when Corrigan came in, and he said everybody in the office down in the big meeting room and said, we are no longer just a basketball conference only. We are going to be putting a strong emphasis on football, and anyone who disagrees with that can get up and resign right now. And some guy actually objected. I won't say his name, but Corrigan said, "Blank, you're fired." And it wasn't long before that guy was gone. And so Corrigan put a lot of emphasis on football. He brought in Florida State, obviously,
Right.
and that boosted the league's image for a long time. Timing was perfect with the dynasty of Bobby Bowden. But and then certainly Swofford tried to follow in those footsteps. I remember the ACC football tour. I started going on that in 1982 as soon as I got to Charlottesville, and we were kind of on a shoestring budget. We'd take a bus all over the ACC, which wasn't as big then as it grew to be. But when Corrigan took over, Brian Morrison, who was then the media relations director for football and basketball, before the first ACC tour trip under the Corrigan reign, Brian went into his office and said, "Gene, what's the budget for the football tour?" And Gene said, "There is no budget. You spend as much as you have to spread ACC football." And so we had needless to say, the 30 or 40 of us on those football tours from then on had a blast. I mean, there were times where we would take the bus trip from College Park throughout the ACC down to Tallahassee. We'd usually be our last stop, and if Florida State or any other school was in one of the I won't call it a preseason game, but early season games like the Kickoff Classic at the Meadowlands or the Disney Pigskin Classic in Anaheim, the tour would end up going to those games at the end of the tour. And there were a few times we did the Meadowlands game one night, and next morning fly to California for the Pigskin Classic the next night. And the conference would rent Cadillacs for us at the airport for all of us to drive to from the LAX to wherever we were staying, and we would close with a pretty incredible dinner after having a pretty incredible dinner in New York the before. So there truly was no budget. And that's when these guys desperately tried to make the ACC a more visible conference in football. And you got to give them credit. They tried as much as they might, but if you can't get it done on the football field, it's kind of all for naught. But I don't know. I don't know what the mentality is now. The conference is not a warm, cuddly, fuzzy bear like it used to be to media. It's more like a cold corporate TV extension of the TV channel, if you ask me.
It really is. You know, they still, at least the ACC still feeds us well. Virginia feeds us boxed lunches. So you can tell where the bread's buttered there. But yeah, it's not just, you know, I was born late, apparently, Jerry. I was born 20 years too late.
Yes, you were.
The only thing I know about media now is that there were a few years where, you know, it's at least at Virginia, we got to interview players one-on-one and got to talk to coaches and stuff like that. But yeah, now it's very sanitized. People sit at a table, everybody lobs questions at them. It's very, very, you know, just corporate speak, corporate PR, pretty much. I'm so jealous. It sounds like you guys had a lot of fun back in those days.
We did. It was somebody should write a book about it one of these days. And I don't know if you could put everything in the book.
I was going to say, you might have to put, yeah, the title of the book might be Burn After Reading. Because I've heard some of the stories. I won't repeat them because I don't want to get anybody who's still alive in trouble. And most of the guys are still alive, but daggone, you guys had some. I know this at ACC kickoffs. These stories after a couple of drinks come out, and yeah, you guys lived it up. Those were good days.
Truly was, and nothing illegal, but
Nothing illegal.
it was a lot of fun.
Nothing illegal, borderline immoral, somewhat unethical at times, but no, nothing illegal. Oh gosh, well, this
some more immoral than others. But,
gosh, yeah. Well, this has been a good talk. Hey, Jerry, as we're getting ready to wrap up here, and this has been a fun. We thought we had nothing to talk about. We're almost at an hour now, so that means we've been having a good time. Thank the sponsors for us to help make all this possible.
Yeah, thanks to Aberdeen Barn, Virginia's finest steakhouse. Wonderful place. If you haven't been there, you owe it to yourself to give it a try. And if you've been there, you know how great it is with the food and the service and the atmosphere. Go by and have a great juicy steak or some ribs. All their food is magnificent, and it's a fun place to hang out. If you like Virginia history, there's tons of photos of Virginia athletic history on the walls there, in photographs that they have put up to just add to the atmosphere. And you can go by, and if you're into watching TV or sports while you're dining, they have plenty of those available. So thank them so much for their sponsorship. Also, the Good Feet store at Stonefield with Jonathan Cotton leading the way. I just heard a commercial by former Virginia player Jaden Gardner about how after using the specially designed arches for his feet in basketball, he said he felt like he was walking and running on pillows. And I can attest to that as well, because I went by and had specially designed arches for my shoes, and that has definitely made walking, and I don't run anymore, but I used to run a lot. But it's made walking a effortless pleasure. And so if you're having discomfort, or even if you're not having discomfort running or walking, go by and check it out. It's worth your time and worth your money to take advantage of what they have to offer. And also Roback, locally owned sportswear company that has all the latest designs, very comfortable clothing, very attractive clothing and very affordable. And again, you're supporting a local company that's growing into a national contender for to take over sportswear in the United States. So check out their ad on my website. You can get a nice discount on your first order if you follow the directions. And we want to thank all three of those people for their support, and all the people, the other advertisers who support our website, jerryratcliffe.com, that makes all of this content possible and keeps us alive and well. So please support these sponsors, because you're
Unknown caller.
supporting jerryratcliffe.com as well.
I need to get over to the Good Feet store. I've taken up running again, Jerry, and this idea of walking and running on air from Jaden Gardner, I want to feel that. I want to see how that works. So I've got to get over there pretty soon. Maybe I'll make a twofer for it, and also then get myself some steak. They're not too far from each other, so
That's right. It's just right around the corner. So
yeah.
knock out two big birds with one stone there.
There we go. Well, thanks to all those sponsors for making this show possible. Thanks to you, the listeners and viewers on YouTube. Thanks to Jerry Ratcliffe, the Hall of Famer. I am Chris Graham signing off. Everyone have a great week.